Tonight, we're jumping right into one of Australia's most passionate and divisive political debates, the proposed voice to Parliament. But look, this isn't just a simple disagreement over policy. What we're really seeing is a collision of two fundamentally different views on inequality, identity, and what the government should even be doing. So let's break it all down. And bam! This quote right here from politician Pauline Hanson, it really just cuts to the core of the no campaigns argument. By framing the whole conversation around corruption in a so-called financial gravy train, it immediately sets this incredibly confrontational tone. So who are the main players in all of this? Well, at the very center of the storm, you've got two key figures. On one side, there's Pauline Hanson, the leader of One Nation and a really vocal critic. And on the other, you have Burney, the Minister for Indigenous Australians and a major proponent of the Yes campaign. When these two clash, you really see what this debate is all about. Okay, so let's get down to it. What is this voice that everyone was talking about? Let's unpack the actual proposal at the heart of this whole national conversation. In a nutshell, the voice was meant to be an advisory body. That's pretty much it. The whole idea was to give Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples a formal, official way to give their input to Parliament on the laws and policies that directly affect their communities. And right here is where the two paths really split. Supporters argue that, hey, if you actually listen to the communities on the ground, you're going to get better policies and better results. Makes sense, right? But critics, they're worried. They're saying, hold on, could this actually create more division in the country? Or are we just duplicating structures we already have? And that leads us to a really major argument from the critics, this idea that we've kind of been down this road before, and it didn't end well. Pauline Hanson really boils the skepticism down to one very direct question. She's basically pointing to Minister Burney's own breakdown of the problems and asking, if the government already knows what the issues are, why is another advisory body the answer? Central to this whole argument is the memory of ATIC. That's the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission. It was a representative body set up in 1990, but it was abolished in 2005 after facing a lot of criticism over its governance. For many critics, this is basically Exhibit A for why these kinds of bodies just don't work. But, and this is a really crucial point, supporters of the voice say you can't compare the two. They argue it's a mistake because ATSIC had real power. It handled government funding and had administrative duties. The proposed voice, on the other hand, was designed to be purely advisory, no control over the money. So the big question that was debated over and over is, are they really comparable? No, this history of perceived failure feeds right into one of the most inflammatory claims of the entire debate, that accusation of a financial gravy train. You hear this massive figure thrown around a lot by critics, $30 billion. That's what they say is spent every year on Indigenous affairs. And the implication is clear. A huge amount of money is being spent, but the problems are still there. So the argument goes, the issue isn't a lack of money, it's mismanagement. As you might imagine, though, it's just not that simple. As the source material itself notes, trying to measure how effective that spending is, well, it's incredibly complex. That big headline number really doesn't tell the whole story of why progress on closing the gap has been so frustratingly slow. And this really shows you why it's so complicated. I mean, you've got to think about things like geography. We're talking about huge distances and remote communities. Then there's deep-seated historical disadvantage that goes back generations. And just basic things like access to services. All of this plays a massive role. So just pointing to a total dollar amount doesn't really account for how complex these challenges are. So from policy and money, the debate now moves into its most personal and, frankly, its most sensitive territory, the question of identity. And you can just feel the pain in Linda Burney's reaction here to Pauline Hanson's use of the term true black. Her response just highlights how deeply language can cut in this debate and how it was seen as an attack on the very idea of Indigenous identity. So why did that phrase spark such a strong reaction? Well, it gets at these really fundamental questions of authenticity, of belonging, and of who has the right to define what it even means to be an Aboriginal person in Australia today. You see, in Australia, there's a widely accepted legal and cultural framework for this. It's a three-part definition. You have to have Indigenous descent, you have to self-identify as Indigenous, and, this is the critical part, you have to be accepted by the community. Pauline Hanson challenges this head-on, arguing there's no true definition, which creates a direct clash with the established understanding of what Indigenous identity is. When you take a step back, this whole war of words really reveals a nation standing at a crossroads, facing a fundamental choice about which path to take into the future. Ultimately, this whole debate boils down to two competing philosophies. One view, championed by Hanson, says that government support should be based purely on individual need. Doesn't matter what your background is. The other view says that historical disadvantage is unique and requires specific group representation to create effective, targeted policies that actually work. And that brings us to the final, lingering question at the heart of this entire explainer. When you're trying to address such deep-seated inequality, what's the right approach? Should policy focus only on the individual, or is recognizing and empowering a specific group essential for making real progress? As this whole debate shows, there are absolutely no easy answers.